I want to start early on. So the way this evolved in the early 90s, I'd started a project dealing with this. And we had set up a protocol where we had made contact with these objects. That ended up being on the front page of the Pensacola, Florida paper. Army intelligence and CIA found out about it, and then they came in and started asking me, what are you doing? How are you doing this? And that started a whole process where there were friendlies and unfriendlies in the U.S. government and other governments who reached out. And the friendlies were people who were very much read into some of these projects, who knew that they had been managed illegally. And they began to advise me. Now, never been in the U.S. government, never been in the military, never been in the intelligence community. So I started out pretty cold and pretty green. I'm an emergency doctor, trauma, big ER. Each of us saw 6,000 people a year. The Gun and Knife Club, we called it. And by 93, I was being asked to go up and brief the director of the CIA for Bill Clinton, R. James Woolsey. Now, I'm a 30-some-year-old medical doctor going up, and the letter that came to me, and this is the key point I want to make, stated, and I have it, it's in my archive, it's going to come out pretty soon publicly, and it says, you're going to be the first person to brief the Clinton administration and the director of the CIA on this issue, because they made inquiries and have been denied access. Now, huge red flag should go over everyone's head right now. You're talking about the President of the United States, the director of the CIA, making through channels an inquiry on something that they know is happening, and they're being denied access. So immediately I knew either that was a lie or the whole enterprise has gone off the rails in terms of being managed illegally and improperly. So at that point, I went up, took the meeting. The cover story was a dinner party for me and my wife and the CIA director and his wife, who was the chief operating officer of National Academy of Sciences, and our host, who was a think tank director for the Pentagon, and his wife. So there's 6 of us. And sure enough, he was very shaken. He absolutely had not been read in. And so I provided him a lot of information. And I brought a whole briefcase full of evidence. I mean, just positive evidence, documents, photographs, this, that. And this is 30 years ago this year, December 13th, 1993. So at that point, my whole paradigm tilted, where I realized there's something very wrong with this. I didn't know anything about, the popular terms now are the counter state or the deep state or secret government, illegal projects, on and on and on. It was off my radar, totally.
You had no idea at the time that any of that was happening.
This was, I had actually sort of a serious PTSD over this because it was like completely upended, my world. And my thinking about our country and what had happened. So I started digging into this, and I'm a full-time emergency doctor. I was chairman of the department, and I got more and more involved. And I made an early call for people to come forward who did know about this. And at that time, the Disclosure Project, in that incarnation, let's call it, was called Project Starlight. And Project Starlight was a briefing process for the executive branch and then eventually members of Congress. So I ended up putting together all this information and whistleblower testimony, documents. I ended up receiving some top secret documents that were not declassified that I have and have published, because we came to the conclusion that these projects are being run unconstitutionally, and therefore all personnel, all evidence, and all documents pertaining to them have no protection over from the National Security Act. They cannot be kept secret if they're going to operate outside the oversight of the constitutional oversight requirements of the president and the Congress.
What were some of the things that were in the top secret documents?
Well, I have one that's from Nellis, the so-called Area 51 area, where there was a security alert by some civilian groups trying to see what was going on there. And it has the distribution list. The document isn't that important except for, because it was a security. alert, but the distribution list is important because it has the project code names and code numbers. That document, which was dated 1990, in the 90s, is one of the documents I gave, for example, to the president's people, and also eventually when I briefed the J2, the head of intelligence, Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Wilson. And that was on the top of the pile because I said, look at the distribution list here. Follow that thread. And so, for example, in the case of Admiral Wilson, now, he's head of intelligence, Joint Staff, Admiral. He made an inquiry into this based on a portfolio I had couriered to him. But he was denied access. And there's public documents now about this that leaked out. You can look it up. And what happened is that he was also threatened personally and with demotion. So this was all happened kind of prior to my stand-up briefing at the Pentagon for him, which happened in 1997, over 25 years ago, 26. And it was a very disturbing event for him. For me, by then, I was battle-hardened. I realized what was going on. He was shocked that he had been threatened and denied access to these projects. I wasn't, because I said, well, you're in good company. The SecDef, Secretary of Defense has, the President, the Director of the CIA, and by then I had met with key members in the Congress and Senate Intelligence Committee. They had all been pushed aside and denied access. So by then I had already accepted this new paradigm of there being, as Senator Inouye said, and I'm quoting, there's a secret government with its own Air Force, its own Navy, its own funding mechanism that's above the law and free from the law itself. I'm almost giving an exact quote here. And, that's something that most people have to understand first off here, is that what we're dealing with is not a sanctioned or even a normal black project. And I can say this with authority because I am working now with people who literally manage the black budget of the United States currently. And they were denied access to all these projects. They had no idea that there were deep black pass-through projects. We'll get into this. How is this done? Structurally, organizationally. What's the architecture? So it took me a long time to unravel this. Mm-hmm. And I had to do it through multiple documents, corroborating witnesses, people on the inside who came forward. So in 2001, by then, I had concluded neither the White House nor the Congress was going to touch this. So we launched the Global Disclosure Project, where I gathered together the first 20-some of these military and some corporate people and had a press club event. It ended up being seen by about 800 million people. Interestingly, the first hour of it was jammed. There had been jamming devices put on the structure of the National Press Club. But it eventually got up, and it used up every T1 line in the city available back then in 01. And, what happened from that was that then there was a whole movement launch that is going to this day. It's a very slow process. You're dealing with U.S. government, moves like a glacier. But, and that's complimentary. But I think that the reality is you can't blame people. There are these sweeping conspiracy theories that are all wrong. That, somehow, I was just talking to a congressman yesterday who had this idea that there were people in his party who were hiding things from him because they knew things, because the process going on now in the Congress, much of it is in classified skiffs and briefings that I know about. But in reality, those people who are trying to get to the bottom of this, they don't know anything. I mean, they're still asking, is that tic-tac, as they call it, this UFO footage, you can drop it in that are Hornets, F-18s were chasing off of San Diego. Is that, from China? And of course, as soon as I saw it, I matched it to a 1967 image we have of a Lockheed Skunk Works, so-called anti-gravity device.
So that would be us.
It's us. It's U.S. Well, let's call it global. It's part of this secret government asset base. So to give people a little deeper unpacking of this is like at the end of the meeting with Admiral Wilson. So I'm doing the stand-up briefing. It's supposed to be 45 minutes in his conference room at the Pentagon. And I have astronaut Edgar Mitchell is there, who was the sixth man to walk on the moon, my military advisor, and a couple witnesses, whistleblowers. And this goes on for almost 2 or 3 hours, much longer. He kept canceling appointments because he was so concerned. And at the end of it, I said, look, we really need your help getting to the bottom of this and getting these rogue, illegal projects under control. He says, well, what am I going to do? He says, I can't act. I'll be rogue unless the Secretary of Defense and the President authorize me to do something like this. And I said, well, that's not going to be forthcoming. We've already attempted that. And he also said something that was very spooky. He said, how do I take on a group that have technologies that can do circles around the best thing I know we have, a B-2 stealth? He says, that's the best thing I know to deploy. And I have found out, and I have now convinced there is, a secret organization that have technologies that can literally do circles around my B-2. And I said, yes. And he just said, it's point, set, match. He says, I don't even know how to take that on. And that is how that meeting ended. Wow. It was very grave. And I went, well, there's a difference. Those projects are being run outside the law. And I said, the law is only and power is only what you use. If you don't use the law and if you don't use power, then you let sociopaths and criminals run amok. And unfortunately, that's what's happened since the late 1950s. I later found it was on Eisenhower's watch, unfortunately. He was old, he was tired, he was a 4-star general, World War II, that this group of, this secret government group sort of seized control over these operations. So in reality, the constitutional government of the United States has not been in a proper oversight and control of these operations since the late 1950s.
So 70 years.
Yep, almost 60, 2/3 of a century.
Wow.
So that's sort of just to give an overview of how this evolved. And now it's evolved to a very big event that's happened about a month and a half ago. The Congress passed and the president signed a law that has for the defense funding, National Defense Authorization Act. And it explicitly allows people to come out as witnesses, whistleblowers on the UAP, UFO issue, including contractors, not just government employees, but contractors like Lockheed Skunk Works, Northrop, Raytheon, Booz Allen Hamilton, MITRE Corporation, SAIC. These are all big chief primary contractors working on the reverse engineering of extraterrestrial materiel and also the building up of systems based on that and other technologies. So
why do you think it took so long for this bill to come about?
It just has to, when we released about 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago, Unacknowledged. So people, if you have Amazon Prime or Tubi or Hulu or whatever, that documentary got about, in the first 6 months, 760 million people see it. Now, most of that was pirated, dark web, Pirate Bay, whatever. It's fine. What I'm doing is a not-for-profit purpose of educating the public on this. I left my medical career to fix this massive problem for not only our country, but for the world and the future of humanity. But that, caused a lot of stir, and it triggered a series of events that has now led a few years ago to the law being passed that the Director of National Intelligence must report on this issue to the Congress. But now, I told folks that I'm working with, and I can't disclose exactly who they are, but they're the most senior people, and said, look, there needs to be a clear pathway, because the only way you're going to get this, you're not going to get this through the chain of command. You're going to have to get people who come in as whistleblowers and witnesses, who are direct witnesses to this, even if it's a small part of what they saw. Maybe they were only guarding a hangar where there was one of these triangular objects at my uncle's old company. My uncle worked on the lunar module, put the first man on the moon, north of Grumman. But which is part of how I had an interest in this. If your uncle kind of put the first man on the moon or was part of that, is sort of a fun thing for a little boy.
Yeah.
I was 14 when we landed on the moon. So. But which was a great thing to had a family member involved with that. But I think that most people underestimate how important every little detail is. So what I did in the 90s up to the 2001 event, and what I've done since, is put together sort of a whole puzzle, a mosaic, based on thousands of little pieces of data. Mm-hmm. So, the evidence is easy to get your mind around one at a time. What's hard to get your mind around is the entire intelligence analysis that has to go with it. So that's what I've specialized in, is gathering that data and then connecting all the dots. How does this corporate operation interface with this base and this SCIF? For people who don't know, the Secure Compartmented Information Facility.
Yeah, a SCIF is where highly classified documents, conversations, mission planning,
right?
That's where it all happens.
Right,
is in a SCIF.
Right. Yep. And I've been involved with that, although I wasn't supposed to be. But I get ushered into places, even though I've never been in the government. I will not accept a clearance or a secrecy oath or non-disclosure agreement. So all this I can tell you because I hold, people who know the system will know I hold my own clearances in that sense. I can say what I want to whomever. What my rule is that if let's say you were someone who had been involved in an operation at the Dugway Proving Grounds out in Utah, there's a DUM there, deep underground military base that's very much involved with this issue. And there are assets there, man-made, anti-gravity, very advanced aircraft. That we, I have people who have been there who've seen them come up at night and move out. They'd be huge black triangles. And those are ours, by the way. Now, there are some extraterrestrial ones that are similar. So if you can envision this, almost any airfoil or superstructure that they've observed that's of an extraterrestrial origin, they've been able to create, let's say, copycat or similar. So this makes this very confusing and unfortunately opens up the possibility of a number of false flag, or what Pentagon called deceptive indications and warnings operations, or false flag operations. But so let's say that you're one of those guys and you come to me and you say, my name is so-and-so, here's my DD-214, you prove you were there, but you say, I don't want to ever be identified publicly. But I will go into the SCIF to provide this information to the people who have now made this pathway for me to come forward legally. Then I will arrange for that to happen. That's what we're doing. And I'm making a call right now. Anyone, no matter how small or large your involvement was over the last 70 years with this issue, there's a pathway, there's a door open. We don't know how long it'll stay open.
Looking to get your financial future organized? Well, if you don't have life insurance yet, that should be at the top of your list. Fabric by Gerber Life is the easy one-stop shop you need with life insurance and other family finance solutions all in one place. Fabric was designed by parents for parents to help get a high-quality, surprisingly affordable term life insurance policy in less than 10 minutes. Guys, I have a son, I have a wife, and I always worry about their financial future if I were to disappear from this earth, and that is where Fabric Life Insurance can help you. You could be offered coverage instantly with no health exam required. Protect your family today with Fabric by Gerber Life. Apply today in just 10 minutes at meetfabric.com/Shawn. That's meetfabric.com/Shawn. MEET fabric.com/Shawn. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions.
But it's been a lot of work to get to this point. It's a very big breakthrough that there is this legal mechanism so that the constitutional government of the United States can get informed on this properly. And what I discovered, and this was a very strange thing from 93 to now, every time I take a meeting with a high-level member of the U.S. government who should know about this given their rank or their position. For example, when I briefed years ago the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, General Patrick Hughes, a 3-star. Well, as anyone knows who's been in the military, that position is the top of the food chain for military intelligence, period. It's and the DIA is like the CIA for civilian. It's military. He had completely been denied access.
The director of the DIA is completely denied access.
I had a multi-hour meeting with him in his office with my senior folks. And it was another, these data points, people remember them as I go through them. How, in what universe can the head of the DIA or the CIA or the president or the chair people of armed services in the Senate or in the Select Committee on Intelligence not have been read in on this? When we are funding it, we estimate there's somewhere over the last 70 years, $8 to $10 trillion that have gone into these projects that are unaccounted for. Remember, the day before 9/11, we have a videotape of Rumsfeld at the Pentagon. I'm not sure he knew it was being recorded because I'm shocked that he said it. And it's in Unacknowledged, the documentary. He says, and this is now 22 years ago. He says, there's $2.3 trillion unaccounted for in the Department of Defense budgets. Trillion, not billion.
How do you have that much money unaccounted for?
Oh, you do. Let me give you an example.
I believe it.
They say, it costs $2 billion a plane to make the B-2 Stealth. It's about $150 million. The rest of it goes through the back door into these unsanctioned projects that neither the president nor the Congress knows. Never mind the American people. Multiply that across the whole system. So we'll get into this in a moment. There are other more creative ways of this organization, this secret, illegal organization. I view this group that's doing this as the world's largest RICO, racketeering influence corrupt organization, like a mafia. But they become pretty much untouchable till now. And I'm not saying we need to go after them aggressively in a negative way, but it needs to be disclosed. And we need to have the people's representatives and the constitutional government at least informed about it. And they are not. The thing that's most shocking to me, even to this day, is that every time I take a meeting with this, and you're meeting with someone of that rank, like the General Hughes, here's a 3-star in charge of DIA. It was so crazy that he's sitting there, and we start talking. And he had made inquiries through the chain of command of DIA. He says, the only thing I've gotten, he goes over to it in his conference room for the general. I had a bookshelf, and there was a little, corny little like E.T. doll, like you'd see at a toy store. Mm-hmm. And he grabs it. He says, this is all I've gotten for my inquiries through the channels. He was in a rage. I said, and I was going, yes, sir, this has happened to most of your folks who are in your position, unless they were brought in and came up through the ranks because they were identified as sociopaths who would break the law and run an unsanctioned illegal operation for decades. There's your criteria. Now, people like yourself, let's say you had been assigned to a project dealing with this. You'd have no way of knowing, as it way up at the food chain, that this was an illegal operation. There would be no foundation.
Yeah.
So you would have been completely innocent. So all of you guys listening and women who, if you have been involved with this, you're not culpable because you're not at that policy-making level where you are willfully insubordinate to the Constitution, which, everyone takes an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Writ large, domestic here. Because, the worst treasonous acts that have ever happened to any country that falls is from within.
Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about here. So I want to be very clear about it. I know I'm coming on a little bit strong on it, but I am so outraged after dealing with this for 30 years and seeing this drag on. So what my concern is that now that this law is in place, and it's only a month and a half on, right? We need to move expeditiously, quickly through that door that's opened. Because who knows when someone may slam it shut. And there's a window we have to go through. And I think that we've started that process. So what I'm doing is putting out a call, a request, and to appeal to people's patriotism. My father was hand-to-hand combat on amphibious landing unit World War II and had pretty bad PTSD from that, although they didn't know what that was. But I kind of feel like we have to look at this and go, given how this is operating, it's our patriotic duty to fix this problem, just from the point of view of the rule of law and civilization and the Constitution. Otherwise, what are we? We're a bunch of monkeys running around the jungle without the law.
Yeah.
The other issue is what's behind the secrecy.
That was my question.
That was when my first meetings with people, like the CIA director, after like 10 minutes of going through the evidence, he says, yeah, I know this is real. He wanted to know, why is it this level of secrecy? Who's keeping it secret? How are they doing this? So that is actually the bigger question. The evidence you can get your mind around. We have it. It's been out there. If you look at Unacknowledged, if you get the book, we have a book called Disclosure. It's 500 and some pages of transcripts of these original top secret people's testimony and documents. It's all in there. So you can get Disclosure book. You can get Unacknowledged, the book that goes with the documentary. It's there. But understand, and we also describe how this is operating. But the why behind it is kind of banal, in the sense of it's money and power. So let's say you have something that would fit on a little table this big, and it's a generator, and it's pulling energy out of what's called the quantum vacuum, or zero-point energy field, which was proven to exist back in the 50s. Now, physicists have described this energy field. If you had a coffee mug, the amount of space in that coffee mug has enough potential power to boil off all the oceans of the world, quote unquote. It's what Tesla called, not the fake car company, actually Nikola Tesla. I call it fake Tesla cars because if they're plugged into the grid, they're not real Teslas. We'll get into this. But that energy field is everywhere, and you can tap into it. And when you tap into it, you're tapping into this energy field that can be converted to electricity or thrust.
So is the energy field, is it everything in between objects? Is that?
It's not just between, it's within. So if you let's take the chair you're sitting in or I'm in. It's occupying a volume of space. Mm-hmm. When you get past the molecular to the atomic level of this, and then subatomic, the quarks, you get this into this pluripotent, it's like the foam at the surface of the deep ocean.
Okay.
That all of matter is fluxing in and out of. The early Lockheed Skunk Works man-made UFOs were called flux liners.
Flux liners.
Yep. Because they were pulling energy from this quantum vacuum flux field. Very advanced physics. We understand it very well. I want to put your audience to sleep going into the arcana of the physics of it. But the point I'm making is that was mastered decades ago.
This technology has been around for decades.
Well, about 100 years that there has been empirical evidence of this energy field. Nikola Tesla called it the infinite energy field. There were others who discovered it all the way back to the late 1800s. Now, they didn't have the physics down of what was happening, but in terms of just observing the phenomenon empirically, here you set up a high voltage system, suddenly more energy is coming out than you're putting in. Those are called over unity systems or free energy, because once you get it tapped, it's just flowing, right? And so that means that every home, business, car, manufacturing, village in Africa would be able to have a a device that would not be very expensive, frankly, to mass manufacture, that would generate all the energy they need for all the needs that we have for a modern civilization. And this would be wonderful. There's no pollution, there's no radiation. And once you have the system, there's no cost. There's no refueling. The bad news is that if you're an oligarch, a global oligarch, controlling the macroeconomic system, big oil, big global systems, and let me translate for those of you who've been in the Middle East, our vital national security interests translates to one word, OIL, oil, energy. So the problem is, if that technology were to be disclosed, it's a quadrillion dollars. It's $1,000 trillion or more in proven assets, oil, gas, coal, public utilities that are obsolete. It's like it's like a royal typewriter or a horse and buggy. That's what they're protecting.
So the entire energy field, everything that has anything to do with energy becomes completely obsolete at this point.
Yeah, and all transportation systems, internal combustion engines, jet engines, rockets, surface roads. So now, surface roads, I say that only because when you take that same physics and do a torsion, a counter-rotating field, you can get what's called an electrogravitic effect, or anti-gravity, pop culture term. It's a terrible term. It's not anti-gravity. But you can create this electromagnetic field where an object becomes essentially weightless and can move. This is why if you look at the radar tracings of these things, these objects can be moving at 200,000 miles an hour, make a right-hand turn. And there are occupants on these. Now, any pilot knows if you had the G-forces of that, your brains would come out of your nose. Mm-hmm. There's no way it'd be fatal. But because it's correcting for 1G, and there's a sort of a bubble, an envelope in space-time that this object is moving in, there's no limit to what it can do.
So they don't feel the G.
They don't feel it and go straight up, at like one of the radar things we have from Belgium, I got from the Belgian Air Force, was an object that was at, slightly above AGL, a few feet above ground level. And it went from there to boom, like 100,000 feet in one radar swoop, boom. And we have a lot of cases like that we've collected. And, the question at this point is, how is that happening? Well, we know how that's happening. And so here's the issue with disclosing all this. When you get past the superficial level, here's a machine, here's a device, here's this, the scientists like myself are going to say, well, how is it doing that? And if they have a thinking brain, mm-hmm. which of course this is a big assumption now with our educational system collapsing, it's sorry to say, but my God, the kids that are now trying to get educated in the system now, God help us all. So, but the fact is that's going to be asked. Now, what's interesting is that the Pentagon has officially said those objects that have been released of the Tic Tac and other UFOs that have been documented with sensors on ships, on board aircraft, and in space. Well, they're not disclosing those sensors, but I know what they are. Those are physical objects moving without any known means of propulsion. Go look at what's been said by the Pentagon.